want to get started, and I'm going to invite up my two colleagues, Mike Boland and Abid Chaudhry. And they're
Yet. So welcome to the local commerce universe. I'm Mike Boland. I'm an analyst with BI Kelsey. With me I have my colleague Abid Chaudhry. Say hi, Abid.
Hi folks, Abid Chaudhry, senior analyst.
So what you just saw is essentially the grand debut of our local commerce universe map. And Abid and a team at BI Kelsey spent many of the last weeks coming up with that. And really what this represents is a new way of looking at local. We're deviating from the construct around local that has been around forever, which is that it's an opportunity grounded in advertising and marketing. We're looking at this more as something that is a broader array of SMB services, not only helping SMBs acquire customers, but help them keep customers, helping them run their business on deeper levels, on operational levels. So we're going to spend the next 25 minutes really going over what that is. Abid's going to spend some time defining it. I'm going to spend some time drilling into some of its component parts, or what we're calling the galaxies of the local commerce universe, to stay true to that metaphor. And that includes areas like mobile and social and some of the transformative areas where opportunities lie. So we really hope this is going to be an overture, really, for the themes that you're going to be seeing over the next 2 days and the next few years, and really represents a new construct for the way that BI Kelsey is going to be looking at this overall opportunity. So we're going to get right into it, and the best way to start is to simply define it. I just went over it kind of in broad terms, but Abid, why don't you take us a little bit deeper?
Sure.
What is the local commerce universe?
Good morning, folks. How's everyone doing? Hopefully they're awake. A little bit of background before we get into the actual definition. BI Kelsey, as some folks in the room might know, and some folks are probably learning in the next couple of days, has been a leader in the local space for the past 25 plus years in various ways. We started off in the world of broadcast, and then we went into print media. We worked with the Yellow Pages and newspaper industries to try to figure out how to take their entire concept of media and advertising and the need to be able to create product opportunities for the advertisers at the local level and take them into an online proxy, whether that was an online directory, whether that was the beginnings of search marketing. As things evolved, we turned into social media, mobile, and over the last few years, what we've noticed is that there's been a real need to try to define what this actual space is. We've seen things come and go, like solo-mo, various random acronyms and attempts to try to put a name on the overall concept of local media, advertising services, et cetera, et cetera. Nothing's really stuck. And the reason it hasn't stuck is because literally every minute of every hour, there's a new evolution, a new innovation taking place in technology, in consumer behavior, in the mindset of actual small businesses themselves when it comes to how they want to conduct business, media, and advertising at the local level. So about 6-7 months ago, the BI Kelsey team came to a conclusion, which was this is a lot bigger, and it's probably going to keep getting bigger than any one particular type of confinement, whether it's social, mobile, local, whether it's SaaS, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how we came up with this concept of the local commerce universe. BI Kelsey has a set of surveys that we create to learn more about the small business and the consumer mindset called the Local Commerce Monitor and the Consumer Commerce Monitor. We use that as the basis to try to figure out how to create a map, so to speak, of the entire marketplace from the perspective of where all the interconnections take place. Now, in this room today, we've got a lot of old friends that we've known from the industry for quite some time, and welcome to you, as well as some new friends that we're going to be making in the next couple of days. And we're really excited to learn more about how all of you are working together, because one thing that we've noticed is that as we put together the logical pieces of all the different types of activities that are taking place in the local commerce market, so to speak, we realize that everything is effectively connected now, and that to speak to marketing or to advertising or to services or to value add for a small business or for a larger business up the chain simply wasn't enough anymore. We created the local commerce universe as a dynamic, growing, living tool. Obviously, this graphic, one of the things that we were trying to sort of figure out was how do we best present this? And I promise you there's category names in those blue bars. This document is going to be available to all attendees today. The way that you'll want to access that is by sending a tweet with hashtag localverse using the BI Kelsey hashtag that'll be available on the screen, and we'll be happy to send you a copy as well. One of the things that we determined as we were building this out was that there's a lot of folks out there. We counted 3,222 companies that were all-encompassing regarding the overall local commerce space. That includes everything that you might be familiar with in regards to the process of media and advertising itself, as well as some of the newer layers that have come up in just the last couple of years. What I wanted to do was do a quick overview of some of the component parts of the actual commerce universe. Now, the way that we actually did this was we've created a database that includes definitions for a handful of categories, this is a big handful, my handful type of categories. And we knew from the start that as we built this out, that we weren't going to catch everything. But one of the things that we really wanted to do was to try to put a name on all the different parts that are existing in the space to try to see where the connections take place. Some of these categories are probably familiar to you, and some of them are probably new. And they're probably new because as local has evolved, we've come up and seen a set of innovation take place that literally did not exist 2 or 3 years ago. Categories like local retail enablement with the usage of beacon technology is up and coming. And every time we actually go back and look at our database, we find that there's 1 or 2 or 3 new companies being added every day. Same thing goes for the specialized vertical category. We realize that there are a handful of companies in the space that have realized that in order to be able to capture the SMB opportunity at the next level, that specialization is key. And we're going to be hearing from some of those speakers today talking about this exact subject, how it's really important to learn about the intricacies of each SMB category that you're working with. We also had some categories here that are really familiar, such as traditional media resellers and search marketers. And as you'll see on our graphic, it's a very saturated space. And you probably realize that already if you're working in those spaces. And the local commerce universe really helped us to define where the actual movement is taking place. So to speak, where's the action taking place? A couple of examples of categories that we wanted to sort of zoom in on that really were not fully encompassing just a few years ago, but now are becoming upfront and close. Payments enablement has become, and Mike's actually talked about this a little bit, payments enablement has become a major component of the small business commerce experience. Small businesses are using all sorts of tools, whether it's Square to do transactions through their phone, whether it's some of the newer stuff coming out from Android and Apple regarding payments through devices. And we're really excited to see what's going to happen when it comes to connecting these categories to the overall advertising and marketing categories. Same thing applies for calls. A couple of years ago, when we talked about calls themselves, it was either a lead generation story or it was about analytics at the most basic level. How many calls did I get? What type of calls were they? One of the things that's happened since the advent of big data coming into sort of the maturity that it has is that we've seen some companies come into the space that are much more advanced than the basic analytics story. And we're watching the space very closely because we're realizing that the experience that used to be strictly confined to the B2B market is now becoming part of the SMB market. Things like call intelligence, sentiment analysis, the ability to be able to route calls that come in based off of their close rates or their conversion into a marketing automation platform, which can then feed into an advertising platform for a small business. Something that necessarily would not have been available just maybe 18, 20 months ago. Also, as we were working on this, we realized there's a whole bunch of brand new players that are part of a brand new category. We had a one-day event a few months ago on the local on-demand economy, and we wanted to make sure that we had a focus on some of the companies in the space that are actually making a major dent in how we think about small business and local commerce transactions. Just this morning, actually, I read a story about Amazon deciding that they're going to now pay regular folks a fee to do local deliveries for them for same-day delivery. All sorts of new things are happening literally as we speak. So we wanted to make sure we capture that in our overall thinking. And also, one of the things, as I mentioned previously, we're watching the verticalization of small business marketing and advertising and commerce take place. Here's an example of one particular type of verticalization story, automotive. And automotive has to be one category that's growing very rapidly in the marketing automation space, as well as in the local marketing space itself, excuse me. We're also seeing that the same sort of activities taking place within the medical SMB space, as well as within a handful of other quick service restaurant type categories. And we're watching closely as these categories grow and this graphic becomes harder and harder to decipher. With that said, Mike, I wanted to focus a little bit on the mobile.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do now is drill down and go a bit deeper on a few different kind of corners, or galaxies as we're calling them, of the local commerce universe. And the first one is, of course, a very impactful and transformative area where a lot of opportunity is opening up and a lot of disruptions happening, which is, of course, mobile. So a good place to start there is to look at BI Kelsey Fresh ad revenue forecast data. So this actually hasn't been published yet, but we're seeing that U.S. mobile ad spending is almost $21 billion this year, growing to almost $62 billion by 2020. Now, the location-targeted portion of that spend is about $7.8 billion this year, which is about 37% of the total, growing to about $26 billion by the end of our forecast period, which is 43% of the total. Now, more apropos to this conference, the share of that localized portion that is being spent by SMBs is about $700 million now, which is about 9%, but growing to $8.2 billion by 2020, which is 31%. And I think that's the most important part of this slide, is the steep growth we're going to see in the SMB share of the mobile local ad spend. And the reason why it's growing so quickly is because, one, it's growing from a small base as mobile is still pretty nascent among SMBs. But also, if you pan back and look at BI Kelsey data that show SMB's share of the overall local ad spending pie, so beyond just mobile, SMB's share is about 36%. So mobile, as it matures from its early stages, again 9%, we believe is going to approach that 36%, and by 2020 represent an $8.2 billion opportunity. Now, there are a number of accelerants for this trend, another number of ways this is working out. One of them is something that goes back to one of the underlying tenets of the local commerce universe, which is that, like we said, it's not just about advertising and presence, but increasingly about things such as commerce and transactions. So one of the leading indicators here is being seen more at a national level, but a lot of brands are working with social tools such as Instagram and Pinterest and Facebook and Twitter, which over the last 4 months alone have each launched different flavors of commerce buttons within their apps. So things like buy buttons or shop or find out more about products. They're becoming much more commerce enabled. Now we believe this trend is going to move down market, and the calls to action and the buttons are going to be more location oriented and SMB oriented. And we're actually already seeing that happen. The first sign of this is in Facebook's call buttons. So Facebook is allowing businesses of all sizes, and especially small businesses, the ability to plant a call button within that presence, whether it be a Facebook newsfeed ad or their Facebook pages. I'm going to go over Facebook pages in a bit and how that's growing among SMBs. But the point is it's becoming more actionable. Now this is very important, of course, because phone calls, as Abid alluded to earlier, are a major part of the local commerce universe and have traditionally been a lead form that is very valued by small businesses. Our local commerce monitor survey consistently shows calls as the top lead form valued by SMBs. And that's especially true in a lot of high-value categories, home services, professional services, autos, very much value phone calls. So the ability to do that within this kind of social framework is interesting because we're living in a world that's no longer dominated by desktop search and Google, but very much fragmenting into all of these other places like social apps. So the ability to call businesses from within Facebook is an interesting trend we're seeing grow. Another kind of dark horse in all of this is messaging. And the leading indicator there is what's happening throughout Asia with apps like WeChat, and in Europe with apps such as WhatsApp, where messaging apps are being used not just to message friends, but to actually converse with and transact with local businesses. So everything from booking a movie ticket, like the example here, this is WeChat in China, or setting an appointment, setting a test drive for a car or a restaurant reservation or a customer service inquiry. These messaging apps are very much being used not just for social context, but some of these local commerce contexts. And we're already even starting to see that stateside. So Facebook is the first one to do this, and they're very big on this idea of using Facebook Messenger as a tool to converse with local businesses. They've built that into the interface and a lot of tools for local businesses to really use this to answer customer service queries. Like I said earlier, tools that help businesses keep customers and serve them, not just customer acquisition. We're seeing a lot of that, and again, this is a very important trend because things are fragmenting beyond just Google and 10 blue links into this other world of touch points with users in lots of social apps. So that leads into my next kind of galaxy I'm going to dive down on here as just one of the examples of the things we're looking at, which is social. Facebook pages, I mentioned them earlier, they're now the leading and most popular form of SMB marketing. BI Kelsey's local commerce monitor pegs it as 57% of respondents are now using Facebook pages. And that aligns with Facebook's own data, which says that 45 million businesses worldwide now have Facebook pages. About 2 million of those are advertisers. So I was actually thinking about this the other day. They just announced these figures about 2 weeks ago. This now puts Facebook ahead of Google in terms of penetration for SMB advertising. And that's an important point too, because this is the way that Facebook is really positioning this as something that is a lot easier to set up and run than a search marketing campaign or running a website or starting an app. They want it to be a substitute for those things because it's so templatized. I believe the direct quote from Sheryl Sandberg at their launch event was, "Be where your customers already are," on such a popular app. And I think the key point too is that a lot of small businesses, the reason why these numbers are so high is that a lot of small businesses have a comfort level with Facebook from using it in their personal lives. And the degree to which it's so easy to onboard and go through the templates to create a presence is really something that I think is a telling lesson in terms of what's resonating a lot with small businesses. Now, another thing they've done is they've revamped Facebook pages, at least in mobile, to be more commerce enabled. And this goes back to the points I was mentioning earlier. So they're now, there's a featured tabbed interface to drill down on areas like what does a business do, like what types of procedures do they offer, what types of products do they have, pricing, all kinds of different options where SMBs can almost have a digital storefront within this Facebook page kind of construct. And this is going to continue to evolve. And then again, all the way to the right here is being able to send them a message through Facebook Messenger. Now, everything I just went over in this social topic is really about businesses planting themselves in terms of a presence within social apps. There's another way that this is all unfolding too, which is businesses that are harnessing the discussions happening in and around their businesses through a lot of social channels. So for example, if I'm a restaurant, inspiring my customers to take pictures and share them on Yelp and Instagram, and then to capture that activity and to amplify it through my social channels. This is a concept that a lot of smart small businesses are starting to jump onto, and a lot of companies in the local space, such as Closely, have really started to pioneer, and a number of others. And the most popular channel for this so far is actually Instagram. Instagram is growing in use. They just announced they have 400 million global users, and they're growing at a time where the underlying technology is very much supporting their growth. The iPhone 6S just announced has a 12 megapixel camera, so the ability to really capture robust images and experiences around local businesses is growing. A few of the different categories we're seeing this thrive in is really, as you can imagine, anything visually oriented. So food's a great example. People love taking pictures of food. That has a lot of implications for large local categories, arts and entertainment, restaurants. Another big local category we're seeing this thrive in is life stage businesses. So weddings, movers. A great example of this is U-Haul. U-Haul's done a great job in inspiring its customers to take pictures of what is, sometimes a very poignant experience of moving somewhere, a new city, new house, and to share those experiences over Instagram, tag U-Haul, and then they've amplified that further through their own feeds, and in some cases in other places like the signage and the sides of their trucks. More of an SMB example. This is a company in San Francisco. I'm actually a customer of this company. This is how I found out about this. This is a San Francisco-based print lab, and they run a daily Instagram contest. So anyone on Instagram can simply upload a photo and tag Dickerman Prints. And by doing so, they're automatically entered into this daily contest. Dickerman then chooses a winner and then gives them a shout out through their social feeds. Now users love this because it's recognition, it's a competition, there's a certain game mechanic to it, a lot of people participate. It's great for Dickerman because it's viral marketing. They put themselves at the center of this contest and this conversation about the appreciation of photography, which is their business. So it ends up being very organic, very genuine, and very powerful for them. They now have 1,000 in-market followers on Instagram in San Francisco, which is a lot for a small business. And another place this is exploding is Snapchat. Now Snapchat has a lot of the same aspects of Instagram in terms of multimedia capture. They also do a lot of video. They've launched something called Stories, which is a format that's starting to really be used by businesses, more on the national scale, but we start to see small businesses do it. We've blogged about this a great deal on the BI Kelsey blog. I recommend that you read a little bit more about this. But to really kind of illustrate what this is all about and how some small businesses are using that Stories format, we actually have a video to illustrate this a bit further. So if we could roll the Snapchat video, please. I think we have audio, but not, there we go. So that's Snapchat Stories. They're active for about 24 hours. They've been used as a combination of businesses launching and creating stories themselves, but then also, as I mentioned, harnessing the activity of their users actually doing that in and around their businesses. A lot of implications there. Again, it's being used by a lot of national brand advertisers, but it's starting to move down market, and we're going to see Snapchat push this a great deal, so something to look out for. The other reason I mentioned Snapchat is that it's very popular among millennials, as is Instagram and a lot of the tools that I went over. And I think that's such a key point because I remember saying 5 years ago we need to pay attention to the behavior of millennials because they are cycling into the ranks of the adult consumer population. They're more and more buying empowered. I did the math the other day and I realized that that's not something that's underway. It's already done. The oldest millennials are now 35, being that 1980 was the cutoff point for that generation. So if you think about it, that means that they fully occupy the coveted 18 to 34 demographic. So their behavior is increasingly important for anyone building business models around engagement points for local type commerce, and then how that's monetized. I believe this is a good starting point. So those are just a few examples of some of the things we are looking at a lot in the local commerce universe. An important question is, what's that all mean, and what is the application to the rest of the conference and the themes we'll be going over the next few days. We're going to invite Charlie back up to the stage for the remaining few minutes, who's going to ask some prying questions and discuss kind of what we have in store for the next few days. So thank you for listening.
Whoa,
Yep.
that was intentional. So, very quickly, so someone's not on that, or what do they do?
Well, one thing to bring up that's interesting is all of the stuff that we just went over that Mike just talked about is still just a sliver of the overall equation. And for example, a reseller that might be working with small businesses really needs to figure out if this would be the right strategy for them. In the next couple of days, we're actually going to be talking exactly about this point, which is how do you determine which of these technologies, which of these innovative products, these sexy things that are happening are really the ones that make the most sense for a small business. And usually it comes down to understanding their customer the best way. Mike?
I agree with that. I think, now your question is that for...
I meant on the big, can we put the thing back up, the stack, the universe? There.
That one.
So I'm sitting in the audience and I'm looking up here, and I don't see my logo up here.
Sure. So we said 3,200 and something were the total numbers. We ended up with just fitting 550 of them on this screen here, just as a representative sample of the well over $200 billion opportunity in the local space. There's a couple of ways that you can actually make sure that you're involved in this community. One of them is you can simply just hashtag localverse on our Twitter, on this conference Twitter,
Yep.
and we'll get in touch with you in order to make sure that we can do that. Or you could literally just come and talk to us, and we'll be able to help you out with that.
And you said 200 billion. So we were talking about this before.
Yeah.
The actual advertising component is 147
That's
million
right.
by our number. So really we're talking about
Well over.
a much bigger opportunity.
And it's, what we're seeing is that if you start to look at some of the folks that were not in this space just a few years ago, like the e-commerce guys and the domain hosting folks, that in themselves, they're multi-billion-dollar industries. And so when you start to combine them all together, you're seeing a gigantic movement take place. And that's one of the things that BI Kelsey's been watching for.
Okay.
It is a 12-digit sum, and it's something that, yes, as you mentioned, the advertising portion of that, as BI Kelsey has projected, is about 147 billion. Now, that's only a part of what is transactional revenues, all of these other things in the local commerce universe that are expanding, because as these opportunities grow, the opportunity to kind of get a piece of transactional revenues or service businesses, a lot of this, as Abid mentioned earlier, is going in a SaaS direction, which is of course a very favorable business model in terms of its recurring revenues that has worked so well at the enterprise level, bringing that to the SMB level with monthly subscription type services. We're going to hear later from Booker, who's a good example of that.
Yeah, really. So advertising increasingly is going to be the tip of the iceberg, whatever metaphor you want to use in terms of this.
It's all about share of wallet, and that's one of the best entryways.
The other beauty point about that is not just the favorable economics of recurring revenue in a SaaS-type model, but also a deeper lock-in, which solves a traditional pain point in local, which is churn.
Yep.
With advertising-related products that churn more heavily, it's harder to turn off your scheduling system than it is your marketing campaign.
Right.
So the ability to have that deeper relationship, I think, is another important component to all of this.